So we're coming to our last class of this full series on transformation. And this is I really like this text and idea by the Baal Shem Tov that we're going to study. So we've looked at, I mean, this topic could go on for endlessly, right? There's so many ways we can improve ourselves and transform ourselves in different topics we haven't talked about, but we talked about generosity, we talked about looking to yourself, we talked about humility, we talked about courage, we talked about the joy of battle, we talked about all kinds of things. Really, I feel like so much of religious life is one of the pillars of religious life is learning how to be a better person, right? This is where one of the things we do is transforming ourselves to be better people, to be better vessels for God. And it's deeply in all of our stories and texts. And there's a reason why the Torah shows all the stories of the patriarchs and matriarchs going through their stuff, right? Because it wants to show us that even people that level have to go through a journey. You have to go through a journey. But the question is, have you been thinking about this a long time and hearing sermons from me and every other rabbi for years and thinking about this and reading about this? And the question is, well, how do you know how well you've been doing, right? How do you know where you are? Like, what's your mark? What's your mark? Like, what's your ABC? Yeah, how are you doing in all of it? Because, it's hard to.
Well, you can measure your comfort zone.
Yeah. What do you mean by measure your comfort zone?
The feeling of comfort. I mean, I think that if you have that, especially at our age,
Yeah.
like it's joyful.
Beautiful. Yeah. 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 Well, if it's deeply ingrained in one, it's just like part of the life, and you don't have the big areas of resistance. We're gonna go deeply into his Baal Shem Tov, and he has 7 basic questions that I translated this. My father used a version of this, but it wasn't at all really translated. So I went through and translated. English is I tried working on it and didn't quite have time to make it not. It's a tiny bit wonky because the Hebrew is very wonky, right? The Hasidim. First of all, Hebrew was not their first language, right? Yiddish was the first language. So when they wrote Hebrew, they wrote rabbinic kind of Hebrew, and it's the way it's phrased is a little bit archaic when you translate it directly into English. So I put in some effort to try and make it flow more and to give it more life, but sometimes I just didn't do that. So, his questions are really, I find, beautiful and really thought-provoking. We can kind of talk about them, and maybe just to begin by saying, as we go into it, how do you know if you've progressed? That there's two things that the Baal Shem Tov says in general is that the pillars of spiritual life are what we've been talking about, always striving to do better and to connect to what we call the divine within and without more, which is always being connected to ultimate goodness and to our highest self. And then there's on the exact same way, in this inexplicable way, somehow being satisfied with what you've been given, even though there's a tension there that's in a sense. So we have a reader back, our kickoff hitter.
If I remember how to read.
Top of the lineup.
Yeah, lost my
lineup hitter. So
I go away every now and then.
It's better.
and
Yeah,
and so yeah,
all right. Shall I start?
I think so. Unless anybody has any questions or thoughts before we go into it. I see everybody online: Charles, Laurel, Nancy, Karen.
Laurel.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
All right. Lashon Hasidim 62. Toldot Yaakov Yosef, quoting the Baal Shem Tov, Torah portioned both. A person should examine himself or herself to see where they are in their spiritual life, to clarify which way to go in life. When a person examines himself or herself to know themselves, it is always a good sign because an evil, bad person's heart is set and they don't think that they are doing anything wrong at all. In fact, they think that they are in the right and that they are righteous. Even if everyone else is saying to them that it is the opposite, they don't listen at all. In order for a person to rise spiritually, he or she needs to examine himself or herself with wisdom and insight. Because a person is made up of good and evil, and the body is drawn after materialism and lower desires, and the soul inclines after spiritual things.
So he's saying this in this very dualistic way. That's just how he's presenting it, but it's a little bit more complex than just the body bad, soul good. It's more that there's a right. This is a very rabbinic idea. There's a good side and not as good side in every person. But generally there's maybe I should have translated instead of the materialism, but we all have an animal body that when he gets attacked wants to go and punch back, right? Or when we have an animal body which has animal instinct that's when it desires something wants to go and grab that thing, from the other person, right? And if you're powerful, why not use your power to dominate all the less powerful, right? And
But this is such a good thing to know that
right.
an evil or bad person's heart is set and don't think they're doing anything wrong. So, don't try and change that person because you're not gonna win.
They think they right. What he's saying is that even to ask a question or even to have a desire to look within yourself already means you're on the good point, right? Because people who don't have any desire to change whatsoever are like, I'm just fine the way I am, then that's as a sign probably might not be that they're bad, but it might be that they're
Stay away from.
so the second you have a desire to change, it means at least you're in the battle, right? Everybody's in the battle on some level. Two.
To subdue the lower material inclination by the spiritual things a person needs to shatter their lower nature and to choose the way of wisdom and Torah. The way to do this is by living simply, by eating bread and salt and sleeping on the floor. And there is no greater battle than the battle with the evil inclination. The evil inclination does not appear only in the form of the lower nature, but also when one is on the way of Torah.
Okay, so this is in those days, Pirkei Avot is 2,000 years old, and for them, living simply was eating bread and salt and sleeping on the floor. For us, living simply is a little bit different. We have a different standard.
Aesthetic.
They were more ascetics than we are.
We put
For us,
salt on our bread though.
we do put salt on our bread, yeah. But we for us, this would be like not we can all think for ourselves what it means to live simply. But there's right, he's setting up this thing where how we're all in this battle, right? Every one of us, he's saying it doesn't mean because you're a good person that you're not in the battle with your lower inclination. Every one of us is in that battle, and we're all part of it, and it's the greatest battle there is, right? It's the hardest thing you're gonna do is to battle those little corners of yourself you don't want to look at. And he's setting up first of all, the best thing to do is to look at yourself and to ask yourself, well, what am I doing in all of this? That's one thing. He's setting up to live simply, right? Living simply is an easy way of, trying to, the battle, right? The battle is between the side of us that's more dense and the side of us that's less dense, and the way he's looking at it. And the way to help curb some of the less dense parts is by living simply, and because we all have that desire for all those things. And though I think I left it out, there's also, and by trying to cleave to goodness, right? That's the other side. By trying to cleave to goodness, then you're waging the battle, right? You're And then we've talked a lot about the battle, right? I guess because we've been having a lot of Hasidic texts, and for them it's a battle, it's a battle within every human being to keep on growing and keep on being a better person. Do you have any thoughts or comments before we move on to the first question?
We can live simply in our time. We don't have to just sleep on the floor and
Yeah.
eat bread and salt. We can just
Yeah,
change it to a simple way, not just always aspiring to the mansion. The
exactly.
little ranch house is good enough.
Exactly. Yeah, I think for us in our society, in our world, living simply is different than for every person it might be a little bit different. We all know what it's like to just live simply and be happy. That we all have a different level that comes to us from our own circumstances in life, right? And that's from within what we've been given. How can we live simply, right?
By being dense. I mean,
Well, the-
being dense,
Yeah.
you don't absorb certain information, but is, what do you
The
mean?
more, so that's a really good question. So I guess I mean by the more material side of things. I guess the way I experience it, at least, and they would talk about this too, is let's say someone's really annoyed you and you're inflamed and you want to go and touch them. Let's be so that feeling you have is very physical and dense, right? While when you're listening to a piece of exquisite music, you're feeling more refined, right? You're feeling like in yourself, you're feeling more refined, and so there's, if suddenly you have this big meal in front of you, and let's say, probably none of us do this very much, like this looks so good, I'm just gonna drop my fork and knife, and I'm just gonna start going in and just, like that. That's more dense, right? That's like more animal side that's taking over. And there's a place, we do have animal bodies, so we do live, in our animal bodies, and that's it. But for them, there is a sense of trying to bring as much as possible that side of us into check, so that we don't punch that person in the face, and so that we don't just go and grab that thing, and so that we don't spend so much of our lives being dragged around by our lower instincts and inclinations, but try and spend as much of our life, in more lofty places, and places that are good for others. I mean, I think, you do a good mitzvah. Go ahead.
In my mind, and I think it's been touched on a little bit. My mind, when I think of evil, I think true evil to me, it's kind of along what you're saying. It kind of comes out of the heart. And you see people who consider other human beings as less than themselves. And I'm sorry.
It's hard to deal with.
And and to me, true evil is when human beings view other human beings as less than themselves, because they can commit crimes against those people with no compunction. And obviously, the obvious thing that comes to mind is the Holocaust, but we see it today. We see it today with different nationalities, with different religions, and that sort of people have, right here in the United States. And that's also the reason, and you see it in corporate America, who's more valuable and who's less valuable in the corporation, and we can treat some people worse and some people better, and that sort of thing. And I think that's the area, and I think it ties in with what you were saying as far as, angry, because I had an instance not too long ago where I got really angry with somebody, and what she did was really inappropriate. And I was justifiably angry, but it also got to a point where I thought, this is really down to ego. My ego got bruised. It's not like I got angry for a justifiable reason, like a social cause, like let's make something better. My ego got bruised. That's really what it boiled down to. And so anyway, those are my thoughts.
It's beautiful. I love how you said about people being cold-hearted, and I think it works also kind of this dense materialism. But right, the prophet would say, "Let me exchange your hearts of stones for hearts of flesh." Right? A heart of flesh is kind of mushy, and a heart of stone is hard and dense, and you can't get through it. Like knock, knock, knock. It's like, and so it's saying we want to make our hearts and our beings more like that, the heart of flesh rather than the heart of stone. And right, the person who's like you were saying, has no compunction about treating other people like terribly, right? They're just, their heart is completely closed, right? It's dense, and
Mm.
they don't, there's no, what's empathy? Empathy is feeling another person, right? Like getting into them and feeling them, and so if you don't have that ability to feel into another person, you only care about me, and maybe some people's me and my family, and everybody else is like the enemy, right? Or I'm willing to do anything, push over anybody to get what's mine, so. Now, but I want to get to the question. So let's, Norma, if you don't mind, but there is,
Let's see, where do we leave off?
we're after the first paragraph, but there is,
But there is no way for the evil inclination to enter when a person is in stillness and quiet. Therefore, as we examine ourselves, the first question to ask oneself is, do we have peace of mind?
so we're gonna go back, because in some ways I think it's the last question. But, so the first question that Baal Shem Tov asked about, how are we doing in our battle, our progress test is, do you have peace of mind? Do you have peace of mind within you, because you've worked at yourself on a certain amount of level, that you have a certain sense.
Competition within.
Say again?
It's the wrongs of the.
No. Well, okay.
So peace of mind is, would you say that's stillness of mind? It's peace, stillness of mind. So that's the way I take peace of mind, some sort of inner stillness, and the inner stillness is probably because you sort of abstracted yourself from your passions to a degree. So you're not going back and forth with respect to your passions. You're not embedded in certain conflictual things if you have peace of mind. But the thing is you want to be modifying your passions at the same time. So you have to spend some time doing that to get to the place where your mind could be still as it considers your passion.
Well, I think definitely, it's the peace that comes from having done a certain amount of work on oneself. Maybe also there is a sense of, you've been waging the battle enough that you have a sense that you're on the other side of it. You haven't arrived, but you've been. Remember, when I was in rabbinical school, one of my kind of side jobs was I helped this elderly rabbi put together a book of his sermons. He was an old rabbi, was from Berlin. He was, I don't know, 88, 89. And he was having some cognitive issues and some things. But he had a peace of mind that I felt just came from having lived a good life for so long. I just had that feeling. I just remember having that feeling within me. I was like, he couldn't remember this, and he was upset about that and this, but overall he just had a peace with him, because he's like, he lived a good life, and as his mind was going, he was like on the right track. It's like you're like a train going on the track, right? And so at a certain point, if you're on the right track, it's like, okay, I've battled in my own mind enough that now I feel I'm going to come up on the right side, and so the stuff, that was a certain experience I had from in that moment, and I think many people can have some measure of it, but it's is there peace of mind from having worked on oneself to work through some of those things that take away our peace of mind, as David was saying, and if we're far away enough in our battle that we feel a sense of like, okay.
Is it a battle though? You think you want to call it a battle, or do you or should it be one patient? For example, with oneself, with one's passions. I mean, to battle it, you're taking a notion that is a lower notion, and you're bringing it to a higher level somehow. And maybe you're getting stuck in the fact that it is a battle. It doesn't have to be a battle.
But he's not saying only passions. He's just saying our lower nature, the part of us that's, we know, right? There's this all, we often have, in many times throughout our day, in small ways and bigger times throughout our lives, there's the path we go, it's the path of comfort, which will not lead us to more growth. And there's the path we can take, which will lead us to more growth, because often it's much more difficult, requires us to confront part of ourselves we don't want to look at, that requires us to, and so to choose the harder path, that's the battle, right? Like,
Less traveled.
the world less
Yeah.
traveled, right? Exactly,
I see it there, maybe there's some acceptance, like there are parts of yourself that you are, you've, I don't mean you've accepted like the bad part of it, but you have gone through enough that you know who you are and what's happening, and that's fine, and you can kind of move on to deal with something else. I mean, I don't know if it seems like there are a lot of different things that you could be working on. It's not like a
that's true.
straight path. I mean, maybe it's the whole path of just trying to improve yourself or accept yourself. But I think that there are a lot of different things that we struggle with, and so maybe just finding acceptance can give us a peace of mind, even if it's not perfect. I don't know exactly what I'm
No,
saying.
beautiful, no, beautiful. I really think, and what I come through healing to all this, I want to go back to this at the end, because I think all the other ones build up back up to it. Just peace, do you feel peace in yourself? Do you feel a certain amount of peace? And if every now and then you feel peace and peace comes in and out, then you feel peace of mind. And it doesn't matter where it's coming from, what it is, if it's because you've accepted parts of yourself or you've worked on this area, do you have peace of mind? And do other people feel some peace of mind when they're with you? I mean, that's a pretty clear test, right? That's just a clear test. Do people feel peace of mind? So I want to get back to it, but I want to get to the others before we go back to it, Ryan. Oh, a second, yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sorry. The second is, as the song Songs 8:1 says, if only it could be as with a brother, as if you had nursed at my mother's breast, then I could kiss you. When I met you in the street, no one would despise me. That is not to care how other people feel about us, but rather to think that everyone is our brother and sister. Because when a person has clarified themselves, they are strong and attached to divine service. Then there's no doubt in their hearts from the mocking, ridicule, evil thoughts of others, that they just see it as outer nonsense and remain strong in and of themselves. Second question, therefore, is, are we affected by what others say about
That's
us?
that's what you just said,
Yeah,
Diane.
that's true, yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes others have good suggestions. They may not be coming from an evil perspective. They may not be coming from some kind of competitive perspective. So how do you know which is which?
Where's the bookmark?
Yeah, well, it's also equanimity. It's equanimity that when someone praises you, you don't go, ooh, and then you go, when someone says something bad about you, you don't go down, and it's very hard, but he's saying
think
it, this
if
is real
somebody-
test. Go
I
ahead.
think if somebody sometimes, if you react to something that somebody says, maybe it's because in yourself that they're not far off, right?
Yeah.
And maybe, and so it pokes you and, gets you agitated. If somebody's so far off base, it's easier to ignore, right? I don't know, something.
I think that's really true, and I think it's also true that other people, this is being real in my mind about people are not always nice to each other, and they can often sense how to poke another person, and they'll poke other people in their lives, it's just what human beings do to each other, right? And so one way, and life is, we're all egos and personalities going about social, cultural, whatever life. And the question is, I mean, let's be real about, most of us spend much of our day thinking about what other people have said and what it means to us and how this, and the question is, how much are we affected by what others people say about us? It's a real, I think it's a real.
The thinking about what other people are thinking about you is a complete waste of time.
It is.
First of all,
Tell my wife that.
think about you. They can either lie or tell the
That's
truth, and
right.
you can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
The note, Sartre's notion that
Nothing you
hell,
can do to change it, right, even if you could.
Sartre's notion that hell is other people
Mhm.
is really a good thing. And when you try and think of what are other people,
Mhm.
what are other people in general? What are other people for you? What are they good for?
David,
know.
you know what I tell clients when they
What?
start telling me, oh, they said this horrible thing to me? I said, you really think they care that much about you? Just let it go. They don't even care about you at all.
They care about their own selves.
That's right.
That's great.
Go ahead.
Just pushing it a little bit further, I think it takes a little bit different meaning when we talk about our culture today versus the culture that this was written in.
Yeah,
I mean, if we
okay.
do the whole thing of the messages, the massage, I mean, we're in a world where everybody, the social media world
Right,
and the
yeah.
performance world is
Yeah.
the culture that's shaping the way
Mm.
people are. And this
Right.
is not the world that this is written in, and it would, it troubles me, like, how do we rephrase this for this world so that it works?
Delete
What-
social media.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I thought you were gonna go differently. I thought it's even more,
Yes.
like, cause it's even more, because like, how do you?
More, but it means that it's also harder to like
Yeah.
push against it because
We're so
It-
networked in it.
we're never gonna assimilate this, I mean,
It's hard, but
not
the whole-
in this generation necessarily.
but the whole of Facebook is designed for this, right? It's
Yes.
designed to keep people looking at what other people are doing and feeling bad about, oh, I'm not doing this, or.
Wondering is, does this kind of language and approach work on people and who are
I mean,
totally in this culture?
I mean, I think this
think
is, but this is enough, this is for people who already are in some kind of religious, spiritual path.
Mhm.
This is for people who are already in a struggle. This is not for people who are teens and beginning their life journey. This is for people who are already thinking about these things and are on a journey and are asking themselves, how well have I done? How well am I doing in my journeying? And I mean, they do think about it, but they're not a spiritual, they think about it, so there is some place to give them some version of this, but I wouldn't give them this whole thing because they would think I'm failing, it's too much. This is for people who are working really hard at this and who are like, okay, I put in work, how am I feeling about what am I doing? And kind of looking for rock bottom clarity, because it's not many people are gonna say, I'm not affected by weather. Some people it comes easier. Some people are thicker skinned than others, right? Some people are thinner skinned and it just is a different thing. But I would phrase it very differently for a teen who's already immersed in endless social media and I would say, hey, how can we, there's a place of asking yourself, having some distance from what other people think about you, right? Which is hard when you're totally at every moment. I mean, my kids are not yet there, but I'm in dread of when it's gonna
Yeah,
be
you
part of.
can't-
It's on its way.
Teenagers, in
Right.
terms of cognitive development and psychological development, they're at a time when they are supposed to maximally care
Right,
about what others think. That's just the necessary development.
Right.
So what
That's
a
interesting.
hell it is to be a teenager without
Yeah.
spiritual wisdom and stuff in
Mm.
social media.
yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. But you can opt out of you can opt out of social media. Are you involved in social media in any way?
I only got back on because of cancer, just to give updates,
Just wanted to
otherwise
say,
I let it burn in the fires of hell.
I don't think your kids are gonna be affected as much. I mean, it's already.
Because they're tampering it, yeah.
Yeah,
they're-
it's getting tampered. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
between time right now.
Yeah,
I would posit that, like most things, it's two-edged sword, right? So the flip side of social media is that there's now the opportunity to get other views other than the group thing
Oh,
that
I'm
you're
not
in,
against technology in any way.
I'm just playing devil's advocate now.
But books do that better.
No, I don't think, I mean, I think I am.
Books do that better.
agree with
No,
you.
no,
Not
Don't get me
really.
wrong,
Yeah,
I
I
hope
understand.
life has been computers since 1980, and I have completely disconnected from social media for all the reasons that we're talking about. I mean, I'm just not, and because it's for all the reasons we're talking about, I'm just playing devil's
No, mine
advocate,
is too, so.
it's easier to get a world view, because if you live in, a small town that has a mindset toward a particular group, like when I was really small, it was toward the Indians, right? Because we lived way up in farming country, we had reservations. And so the way you hear about people talk about Blacks and Latinos here, that's how we talked about Indians in the small town where I grew up in. And, that's it. It's the group think, and that's the way everybody thinks, unless you start to think outside the box. And if your library doesn't carry those books, you know what I'm saying. But today with social media, there's the opportunity to see the world from a different perspective, no matter where you are.
and I think you're right, and to empathize with people who are very far away and to think about them and care about them, sometimes, I mean, it has to evolve. There is potentiality there for connection and deepening of human empathy and compassion, but a lot at the moment to me at least, from what I 80% of it is harmful, but maybe it's slowly shifting a few percent every year.
Something to make a critique of social media. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
talking about bullying.
Yeah,
Which is very, very big.
yeah. Yeah, and so again, so I think this again is not meant for people who are being bullied. This is meant for people who are just leading normal lives and trying to improve their own being and character and working on themselves and saying, well, you think you have equanimity, but let's be rock bottom. Do you really have equanimity or not? And you think you feel you've worked hard on yourself and transformed yourself, whether it's for spiritual practice and therapy or whatever it is. But are you affected by what other people say? And that's a really hard question to, there's rock bottom kind of thing to it. And I find it's a powerful question for the Baal Shem Tov to place there as part of the progress test, because it's getting to a core, and he has two other questions that are connected to it, because getting to the core of what it means to be a human being, and we're all social animals, right? So it's not an easy thing to work on. But I think the social media is a great thing you brought up, because it's like in some ways the most pointed version of that, because you go, at least even myself, since I got on Facebook towards the very beginning, it wasn't long before I'm there and I'm looking at other people's accounts and looking at the pictures they're posting and being like, wow, their lives is amazing, and why isn't my life like that?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be bullying. It's either the envy or the being left out.
Or feeling left out,
Yeah.
and they're probably having the same thought, because I'm posting, my best pick, the 10 pictures that tell the best version of my life from the last year, and so they think, so it plays on that side of being a human being that's affected. And part of what he's saying is that in spiritual life, equanimity is really important, right?
Yeah, if social media stirs up shame or pride, which are the two really key feelings that people have lots and lots of trouble resisting. Okay, shame and pride are the big deals. It's hard to get out of that. I mean, because you get used to the tension between those feelings. Being ashamed or feeling pride, feeling, some sort of competitive advantage with another person. And social media is really good at stirring up shame and pride. In fact, that's what it's sort of calculated to do. And it's hard to get out of that, but one can get out of that. But it takes some struggle to do that.
We only went on Facebook once, and that's when we got trapped in Morocco.
Oh.
And my daughter said, go on Facebook, find out if they're sending rescue planes. That's one time we went and because the king of Morocco closed the border because of COVID, and we were there.
Yeah, it's very helpful, actually. Well,
Yes.
that's the only time in my
time
life that
ever.
I've used Facebook.
So I'm wondering if
Yeah.
from this discussion, just abstracting a little bit from it,
Yeah.
are we also, not the social media thing, but are we also saying that you need the culture to support you in doing this? You need to be in a culture that supports you. You need to be with a social group that supports you. It's not just
I mean-
on us.
You can do it on your own too. You
It's-
don't need the culture as a, no.
I mean, it's helpful.
As a formed person, you don't need the culture that.
It is helpful to have other people who are also not doing it, but you can't count on others, because the basic way of the world is to constantly be affected by what everybody else. That I think that's if we're being real about human beings, it's what drives a huge proportion of human behavior, is how we're affected, is other people's feelings about us and our feelings about them throughout days and decades, and it's a really hard, it's a big, just because we're social, that part of us, and it's hard for that not to take up really valuable time that could be used for something completely other, right? And
No, I guess I'm just thinking, I mean, like,
Yeah.
we're all here talking
yeah,
about this.
yeah, it's helpful.
You said it's a real, it's a religious community.
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
spiritual thing.
No, it is. No, you're right.
Yeah.
Totally. That's right. Yeah, talking about it and being together, like we're trying to do this together. It feels strengthening, and then go out and.
Well,
Yeah.
it's stuff you wrote and trying to
Yeah.
have individuality, but unity and balance.
Hmm.
And there's a picture from Kabbalah for.
Yeah, beautiful. I like that. Yeah, it's like you're part of the unity of finding your balanced place within it.
Mhm.
And then having a group of people who are also trying to balance it. And if you're all in balance with them, you go out into the world feeling you're part of some group of balanced people who are also trying to do this, that's really, I mean, I guess that's what all of religion is founded on, that very principle in some ways. Morris, let's go, third question. No, yeah, for the third question, go ahead.
The third question is, do we forgive?
No, about the question, the one above,
Oh,
or the third question.
for the third question, one should also clarify if one forgives others' sins and is truly humble, as the Talmud Roshim. Hashanah 17b says that God only forgives the wrongs of those who see themselves as the little.
Question is, go ahead.
The third question is, do we forgive wrongs done against us?
Okay, so that's,
Furthermore,
well, let's stop before we get, that's the fourth question. Well, you know what, let's read the fourth question too, because they're both connected. Go ahead. Furthermore,
when one is attacked, is one truly being forgiving, or is one only thinking one is above others and does not need to be condensed, condescend to them? Or are we truly humble, knowing we are all fallible? The fourth question is, when others attack us, do we respond? If we do not respond, what is our motivation in not responding? Is it because we're indifferent to praise or blame? Or is it because we think it is beneath us to respond? But underneath, we are fuming. Or is it so that others should think that we are humble?
yeah, so very challenging stuff, right? I mean, it's not easy, but this is the mark of really progress, right? You know, even one little bit at a time. You know, do you forgive other people when they do things against you, right? The expression, I'm not even, you know, it's easy to make a mountain of a molehill, what other people's do. And when you do it, when we do it for ourselves, most of us make a molehill of a mountain, right? And so others are like, oh, you know,
Well, you
Yeah,
taught us something in one of these classes that I say every night now is, God, please forgive me if intentionally or unintentionally I've harmed someone.
Mm.
And also, I forgive someone if they have harmed me intentionally or unintentionally, and it really helps.
that's a spiritual practice. That's an
Yeah,
amazing
that's
spiritual
sacred.
practice you're doing. That's amazing.
Thank you for that.
No, I gotta do it too. It's a really, it's right. Are we forgiving of other people, and from where is that place of forgiveness coming from? You know, and I mean, it's also really
So
challenging.
where is it coming from, the place of forgiveness? Where are we sitting?
Like
Where are we sitting when we can do that? Where?
Like for top.
Towards yourself.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
You're to the true
yeah,
self,
but when
as
you're
opposed to
left,
the, you know, the battle is the ego, which is so deceptive. Am I forgiving this person by dismissing their insults, or am I just continuing the pretense of my ego because they're nothing to me?
yeah.
And like, what story are you telling?
And alternatively, where are you?
Right.
So you're in neither of those places, then where is it, a speakable place or not speakable
It's
place?
an experience of the divine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, yeah, beautifully took it out, right? When you're really in that sense of self, the capital S self, and you feel we're all part of the self, and someone does something to you, you barely notice it, right? Or it doesn't, you think, you know, you might even think, how many times have I done that to someone else, right? Like we're all doing this because we're all poor creatures going through our difficult things. But when we're in the ego, we're thinking, oh, they got me, but I'm gonna get them back, you know, and if not now, then later, you know, I'm gonna get them back, you know, that little voice that we don't want to listen to, or you know, so that's and even so, and he's talking to spiritual seekers, right? And so spiritual seekers, you know, humility is a value, so spiritual seekers often try and be humble. And there's an easy place where that humility can really be hiding a huge ego. They often talk about this in spiritual thing. It's like I'm so humble, you know, but it's, you know, or someone treating us, other people not feeling other people are beneath us, not treating us well. So putting on a humble face, but really underneath fuming, like, oh, you know, like, and it's like you're saying, everybody goes through this, and even people, like he's saying, when people who follow Torah, he means the Hasidim, who are ostensibly on this path in a very intense way, you know, like different characters, right? You have a bunch of spiritual people in any community, and you can have two people who are equally as spiritual to each other and wonderful people, but somehow their personalities don't gel, and there's this is some ego clash that keeps going on, right? This bam, you know, and so it's like, and it's very easy to like, you know, say, well, beneath this person or that, or, and so it's a huge, I mean, these are, like I said, these are like rock bottom questions to ask yourself. And I think it's clarifying, it's a word, right, to really go and see where are we with all of this? How are we doing? Go ahead.
Somewhere I read, I don't remember if it was in your class or in David Schwartz's class, but God said, keep working on it,
Yeah.
even if you don't
Yeah,
get there.
exactly.
Just keep
Yeah.
working on
You
it.
keep working, and it's not upon you to finish a task.
That's right.
Yeah, or you're free to desist from it. So it's and this is what the battle is considered to be, right? So even,
I think there's a difference. And, there's two sides to that. One is, and I think bullying is a good example because, you know, it's, you know, I was relating the experience I had earlier. This woman did something and it really just inflamed me, but it's strictly an ego issue on my part. And I should have just let it go. But there are situations where it's a truly bullying situation and you really need to stand up. You need to stand in the gap and you need to take
For
a
sure.
stand on that because, first of all, for you personally, it's never gonna end. And you know, if you don't stand up and do something about it, but secondly, I consider that an educational experience for the other person when you do
Yeah.
something, and I really feel that way. You know, you need to educate this person that bullying is
Yeah.
not okay.
for sure.
And make the world a better place in that regard and stand up and say,
So
you know, it's not okay. So
But if we-
there's two sides and it's a fine line, but I think
I think-
ego is part of it that comes in and maybe it's the defining point.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. So if you're responding to a bully in that moment, you feel you should respond. If you're doing it without anger, but like you're hissing rather than stinging, you know, you're showing it them because you don't want to be stamped on. And it's also different for every person. There's a story about an Eastern teacher who had all these students, and to go visit him, one had to go on a boat. And there's always all kinds of people on the boat because they're going to other places too. And at one point, one of the students came to him and said, "You know what? You know you know, I was on the boat today. There were other people who were belittling you and saying how horrible you were, and I thought, you know, it's okay. My teacher's above all of this." And the teacher said, "What? These people said terrible things about your very teacher, and you did nothing? What? You know?" And it was just like, and then like years later, there's another person who came up and said, "You know what, today I was on a boat and some people said terrible things about you. And I got up on there on the boat and I said, I'm going to sink this entire boat or we're all going to die if you don't shut up." And he said, "How dare you lose your temper in this moment? How dare you think that my honor is more important than these people's lives," right? So it all depends on the character of the person. And some of us, we need to work on being less fiery, and some of us need to work on standing up for ourselves and other people. So I think it also if you're the person being attacked, it also depends on what you need for your growth, right? There's no one path. We all have different things we're working on. And some people are, you know, their path is they get too fiery and they need to have equanimity, and other people are through false equanimity, you know, they don't stand up, they're too meek, and they need a little fire, a little chutzpah to get out there and stand up for things that are important. And another story from someone I actually knew who was in the car, a Rebbitzin who was in the car with someone, and this was and it was like a small country road, and they were about to come onto a bridge, and they got first on the bridge, and then a truck came, and the truck saw these two ladies in a car, and was like, and drove kind of to the middle, like to make them back up, and then so she was about to back up, but the Rebbitzin said, "Don't back up. Like, this, you got on here first. Why should you have to back up?
Yeah.
Stand your ground." So they just stood there, and he's honking and honking and honking and honking until he backed up, because it wasn't. So it's like some people you need to be taught, no, you don't back up, you know. And so it's different for every person what the lesson is, in spiritual life. That's why, so it's not always clear from it, but it's the but it has to come from not a place of ego. If you're responding, it's not from a place of ego. It's coming from a place of this is the right thing to do to respond in this moment, not, you wounded my ego and now I'm going to show you my ego is 10 times bigger than yours. But
You
yeah.
know, I'm just gonna
Go
add
ahead.
this little story because responding to a bully doesn't necessarily have to be, fire and, like
Yeah.
a major clash. Many years ago, when I was at IBM, there was a director 2 levels above me. And we were having disagreement about something and he was in my office and he got extremely aggressive, physically aggressive with me. He got like this far from my face, literally.
Wow.
You guys know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
the guys get really, especially with women. He got like this far from my face and swore at me. And I saw red. I was really angry. But A, it's a professional environment. B, it's a guy that's 2 layers above me, that sort of thing. And I thought, you are leaving my office, honey. That you are not gonna talk to me like this. This is what I'm thinking in my head. So all I did was I stood up calmly. I mean, it wasn't like aggressively or anything. I just kind of like stood up because I was sitting down. And I was talking to him just like I had been talking to him before. And the physical changed the dynamics to a certain extent. And then, we're still talking about what we were talking about before, no change whatsoever. And I took a step forward into his personal space. He took a step backwards and we're still talking. And I walked him to my door that way.
Nice.
By the time he got to my door, he
I
was
like
like,
that.
I think we can solve this problem really quickly. And it's,
Amazing.
standing up
Yeah.
to a bully doesn't have to be,
Yeah,
but it can be, no, this is the line and you're not gonna cross
that was
it.
beautifully done. Yeah, well, you have to have some equanimity to be able to deal with it in that way when you've got a rising, it depends how deep it's
Like the.
pushing your button, right? Yeah, when it's pushing your button to. Barbara, if you don't mind reading the 5th question.
Do we read the paragraph?
Oh, yeah, the paragraph before too, yeah, please, so yeah.
And one should clarify for oneself if one's heart goes after good deeds and mitzvot for desires bad attributes. By knowing this, one can subdue the negative desired trait for trait, and work on leveling them out. The 5th question is, what pulls us more, mitzvot or averot, sins?
And so right, let's just we can do this one quickly, but this is like progress test, right? Let's be real. What pulls you more in life? Is it the good things or the not so good things? Where are you? And that's very, yeah.
Should we at least make progress to say, like, do the sins pull me less?
Yeah,
Like,
for sure. 100%, 100%. 100%. That's exactly, that's progress, right? I mean, to say that they don't at all would be, would be sainthood, right? But it's saying, if they pull you less, then you progressed, right? It's
Yeshua,
yeah,
like how often are you engaging in that? And that's something you can count practically.
yeah,
See, is it less, right?
interesting,
As
yeah.
opposed to like, I failed and let me just now lay and wallow in the sin and the defeat and the shame,
Yeah,
right? So.
no, beautiful, yeah.
Count Teshuvah.
And for those areas that we all have that lead us to, speaking not the way we wish we'd spoken to a loved one or whatever it is, I mean, sometimes it takes like 1,001 times before you make, significant progress in whatever it is, right? It's not or if it's some other thing, or, it takes, I mean, the easy areas, they progress easy. It's the hard areas that take a long time, right? We all have areas where we progress a little bit easier, and then there's areas where, it's like you're butting your head against the wall. But as Rabbi Nachman said, if you can really change one real trait throughout your life, you've accomplished your life's mission, So, Diana, if you don't mind reading the next one. One should also,
What's this question?
one should also, no, but just below there, one should also ask oneself.
Am I supposed to? Yeah, okay.
Oh, there's a good
Question is,
point.
what pulls us more? Mitzvot or avirot, sins? One should also ask oneself, which way do we naturally turn to? How strong is our inner conviction? whether we are in the house or out of the house? And are we affected by being close to others, or do we lose our center? Can we go among others and be a positive influence to help them? But if one sees that the moment one leaves the house of study, we are led to sin, we need to spend more time within ourselves, finding the strength of being.
Sixth question, go ahead.
Keep going.
Yeah.
This
Which way?
How do others affect us?
I'm strong,
Can we
sir.
go among others and remain bound to God, or do we need seclusion to keep our mind right?
Hmm.
One should also
So
ask,
let's stop there. So really interesting, but it's saying, if you're able to get to a place where you feel equanimity, you feel joy, you feel this, or you know what you stand for, you know your deep beliefs, then you go among other group of people, and very quickly you're led into, saying bad things about other people or whatever it is that you used to do, but you've tried not to do so much anymore. Then it's saying how, so it's
They go
saying
among others.
spend more time in your building your center, right? More time building that strength within yourself, not to lose it the second you're among other people and get drawn into all the mishigas that they're all drawn to, or whatever it is. I mean, these are hard questions, right? But it's
Well,
saying
like a muscle. It's like a muscle that you have to build in some ways.
Can you go among others?
In some ways, you almost have to sometimes be in those positions so that you can make the choice. I think if you're never confronted with it, how do you know?
beautiful. No, and none of us, and we're all living in the normal world, so we're just totally really confronted about it. But there's a sense, if you are trying to work on yourself, which means building some counter values to what drives most of the world, how strongly can you hold on to those, right? And how quickly do you lose them when you're just, do you and when you're suddenly with others, and they're, whether explicitly or implicitly, poo-pooing everything that you're trying to build within yourself, how do you get drawn back into that? Or are you able to, at least within yourself? Or the next stage is, are you able to like gently affect them to also come towards your, to the better way of being, and so that's, yeah.
This is going off into kind
Yeah.
of politics thing, but
Yeah.
it makes me think of the argument that the Haredi make for why they should not go in the military, is because they will come back to
Mhm.
unreligious, but this is
Yeah.
really saying you should have, if our education has worked with you, you should be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's why I feel a lot of what's in the Haredi world are sound spiritual principles, but a lot of it is stuff like this, which I think you have to pick for yourself. You can't just hereditary pick it up from another person. If you want to live this kind of life, I think it should be a choice. And if you do it, then you want to live some life where then you have to go through training. But most people who are born don't have a temperament that's fit for such an intense level. And I think in that world, 75% of them are not suited for this life they're trying to live. And would be much better suited if they were just living a normal life, or maybe 80%, and so maybe for some of them, they could live that really intense, secluded life. But then also, like you were saying, at a certain point, you're ready to go out and help others with it, and if you're just keeping it for yourself, what's the point, but they should be going out to help others. But for all the others, they need to be, they're a different place. And David, if you don't mind reading our last question, one should also.
One should also ask oneself and to know in matters of Torah what draws us and makes our minds inspired. Is it the simple truths of Torah or the secrets of Torah and all? Where is our soul drawn to? Because it takes habits and time to find one's place with all of it. The seventh question is, what kind of learning gives us spiritual sustenance? That is, do we understand what kind of souls we have? Do we know what type of wisdom inspires us? What approaches to God work for us?
Yeah,
I want to hear about this.
well, I
And
think,
I'm like, what in the world is that?
well, I think what he's saying is everybody should be real about where they are, and so if you're more drawn to this other thing, then don't try and go to a Torah that doesn't really inspire you. But you shouldn't spend your time learning the intricacies of Talmud if really what you want to learn is the mystical stuff, because that's where you are. you know, and so that you should go to the stuff that feeds your soul and not try and be where you're not, and, you know, and so, I mean, he's talking to people who are on spiritual paths and saying, you know, you're trying to learn all this mystical stuff, but maybe it's just not for you at the moment, you know, this other thing, and maybe there's a person who, you're trying to be a great Talmudic scholar, but let's be real, you're really at this moment, your soul just wants the soulful stuff. Don't go into all the other stuff. Like, be real in your progress test about where you are and what gives you fire and inspires you, and then go completely towards that, because that's what will take you forward, you know, and maybe it will change to a deeper level at some other point, but, you know, everybody, and so if I put this all together and we're at the end of all of it, I think it's a beautiful, right? It's really like, look at all these questions, all these things, and then see where you are. And I think it's a powerful way to then try and chart, you know, where to go forward and how to position oneself and to continue to work. Because as we were saying, it's endless, right? The work is endless. We keep working on it. And like, I love the practice you gave, you know, and I find it hard to do it this way, but I think it's the best way. If you can think of one thing that in your own being and character that you really want to work on, if you can find a practice that's just targeted for that one thing, that's the best thing you could ever do, right? You know, if you have trouble forgiving people, but you have a practice you put there to help you forgive people, or if you have trouble some other area, but you can find a practice directly targeted, that's the best possible thing you can do, because it's trait per trait, you're working on that thing and trying to work at it and seeing how to go forward. So thank you, everyone. This is really
Very good.
interesting.
To meet in the summer or not?
So we're gonna take a break for the next few weeks, and then we're going to and then we're going to
Oh, look who's back. Yay.